Welcome along to Property Tribes TV, where throughout the month of April 2013 we are celebrating Tenancy Deposit Protection Month, powered by TDS. And I'm joined by Ben Beadle from TDS. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you very much.
You wear two hats at TDS, don't you?
I do indeed. I'm the head of member relations in England and Wales, which means I look after membership, subscriptions, the academy, communication, and I'm also a director of TDS Northern Ireland. So I'm the man on the ground out there trying to make everything work.
Now, in this video, we're going to be busting some myths about tenancy deposit protection, because there seems to be a lot of misinformation out there. And the first thing I'm going to ask you, Ben, is when is a deposit not a deposit?
It's not easy to say, that's for sure. There's a lot of misconceptions about holding deposits and deposits. And I think it's important to say that a holding deposit does not need to be protected for the purposes of deposit protection. So really the onus is on the landlord or the agent that when the holding deposit stops becoming a holding deposit and it's been topped up to form part of the obligations under the tenancy agreement, that's when it becomes a deposit. And it could be a full payment, it could be a partial payment. I would just point out that it's always best to err on the side of caution rather than make yourself a test case over a couple of days. If you're in any doubt, protect it straight away. Absolutely.
Now, some landlords, for their own reasons, decide not to take deposits, but they sometimes take money for damages and repairs up front. Now, that, in the eyes of the law, is a deposit.
That's right. It doesn't matter what you call it, if it's what the obligations are and what the purpose of that sum of money is. So if the purpose is that it might not go back or it will be refunded back to the tenant at the end of the tenancy, then, as I say, it doesn't matter what you call it, it's a deposit. Now, there's one other thing just to stress on that point. A landlord doesn't have to take a deposit, and if a landlord chooses not to, they don't need to comply with the Tenancy Deposit Protection Scheme regulations.
Now, let's talk about the actual timing involved, because when you take a deposit, there's this 30 days
Correct.
that you've got to protect it. How does that work in, say, a student let where you take a deposit in January but they don't start until September? At what point do you protect the deposit?
Well, if you take a deposit and you've got the tenancy agreement signed in January, even though it's not due to start until, say, September, the clock starts ticking in January.
Very important for people to know that.
Really, really important. As I say, it doesn't have to be the full amount of the deposit. It could be a partial payment, etc., etc. Remember that 30 days starts ticking from that point, so get it protected.
So what would be your final myth to bust?
Well, the final one would be protection of the deposit is really, really important, but don't forget you've got prescribed information scheme leaflets to worry about. Lots of landlords that I see at various events up and down the country, they're getting to grips with protecting the deposit, but when you mention prescribed information, it's like I'm talking a foreign language. So if you're taking a deposit, protection, yes. Prescribed information, don't forget it, because the statutory penalty applies if you don't serve prescribed information. And also, depending on what scheme you use, you may have to serve a scheme leaflet alongside it, and that forms part of the PI, and you mustn't forget it.
So your advice would be to check the deposit protection scheme you're using, and they should give you all the prescribed information that you need to give the tenant to make sure that you've covered dotted the I's and crossed the T's.
Absolutely. TDS give you a downloadable template, and for letting agent members, we can send that to you so you can incorporate it into your tenancy agreement, so it's a piece of cake.